Well, how are the milk and cookies, girls? Remember, milk and cookies?
We are so excited talking about Andy, we forgot to eat them. Hey, I know how they came up with the word for cookies.
Because it's like stamping out a cookie.
And it's easy to figure out where they got piano and violin from. Yeah, but I wonder who thought up all the signing stuff to begin with. Yeah, how did it all get started?
Well, that's a very good question. And there's an interesting story about how sign language started here in the United States. It all started many years ago, largely through the efforts of a man named Thomas Hopkins Gallaudet. Thomas Gallaudet was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1787, and later his family settled in Hartford, Connecticut. Gallaudet was a very good student in his early school years. He entered Yale University at age 14 and then graduated first in his class only 3 years later. He returned to Yale as a graduate student in 1808 after having served in a law apprenticeship, but his real interest was always in the ministry. Gallaudet's goal to become a minister was put aside when he met Alice Cogswell, a 9-year-old deaf daughter of a neighbor, Dr. Mason Cogswell. Dr. Cogswell was a prominent Hartford physician, and he was very concerned about his daughter getting a good education. So he asked Gallaudet to travel to Europe to study methods for teaching deaf students there. He especially liked the methods of the Braidwood family in England, who used oral communication to teach the deaf. Oral communication uses lip reading to understand what another person is saying, but the Braidwoods didn't want to share their teaching methods with Mr. Gallaudet. Also, Gallaudet was not convinced that the Braidwoods method would be the best way to teach deaf people how to communicate. While he was still in Great Britain, he met a man named Abbé Sicard, who was head of the Royal Deaf School in Paris. Sicard invited Gallaudet to Paris to study his school's methods of teaching deaf students with manual communication. Manual communication is using your hands for sign language. Mr. Gallaudet was very impressed with this manual communication method, and he studied teaching skills under Sicard. So he sailed back to America and traveled around New England, raising enough money to start a deaf school in Hartford. This school later became known as the American School for the Deaf. The American School for the Deaf was the first permanent school for the deaf in the United States, and young Alice Cogswell was one of the school's first students. Thomas Gallaudet served as principal of the school from 1817 to 1830. He resigned from the school in 1830 to devote his time to writing children's books and to his first love, the ministry. Thomas Gallaudet always had a dream to create a college for deaf people. With the help of a wealthy landowner named Amos Kendall, the college began, and Gallaudet's son, Edward Minor Gallaudet, became the first president of the college. Today, Gallaudet University is the world's only university dedicated to deaf and hard of hearing students. They teach all their classes in sign language. The school was founded in 1864 by an act of Congress, and its charter was signed by President Abraham Lincoln. Well, that's all the history lesson for today, girls. Keep practicing your sign language, and we'll have another lesson tomorrow.